There's something to be said about paying attention to your dreams. My name is Z. Martin, and I'm here to tell you how I survived the last stagecoach robbery in Putnam County. It happened on October 15, 1882. Sheriff Brown organized a posse to go looking for the 3 masked bandits, and they caught up with Bug Hunter and put him in jail. But the Edward boys, they got away. All I know is there's something to be said about paying attention to your dreams. A few nights before we took the stage for Lebanon, I had a terrible dream. In my dream, I saw 2 or 3 men standing over my brother pointing guns at him. I was terrified because it seemed so real. Well, it was impossible for me to sleep anymore that night. I just kept thinking about our trip. I was certain my dream served as a warning. Stagecoach robberies were common in those days. We had no banks, so most of our money was sent by registered mail, and passengers carried a considerable amount of money with them when they traveled. Brother and I were scheduled to travel alone. I was headed to Nashville to study music, and Brother was going to visit relatives in Missouri. He was 19, fearless and brave. I was 25, timid but cautious. I was ashamed to tell Brother I'd been fretting over a dream because I knew he'd laugh at me, but after much consideration, I made up my mind to try and persuade Ed to take the Sparta-Nashville train instead of the Cookeville-Nashville stagecoach. Of course, he wanted to know why I wanted to change our plans, so I reluctantly shared my dream. He laughed and said, "There's nothing in a dream, and if that's your only reason, we will go by stage as planned." The stage came by for us at 8 o'clock Sunday evening. Brother and I were the only passengers leaving Cookeville, and I was feeling sad. Leaving home, and especially my father, proved difficult. Papa was a prominent doctor in town and an elder at the Cookeville Church of Christ, now known as the Jefferson Avenue Church of Christ. Well, I didn't want to worry him, so I put on my best smile as I hugged Papa and Mama goodbye. When we left Cookeville, there was a sense of foreboding in the air. Well, even the sound of the wheels on the road felt like a funeral knell. Mr. John Rayburn was our driver, and I told him about my premonition. And he told me that a few evenings earlier, 2 or 3 men had followed another stage for several miles and that a robbery was very possible. Well, that didn't help ease my mind any. I immediately got busy watching for signs of danger. Now, I'd like to tell you I was able to stop fretting just long enough to enjoy the beautiful scenery, the winding road, the hills, valleys, ridges, and the moonlight, which was almost as bright as day. But on that fateful night, those beautiful hills turned ragged and ominous as they sloped down into the dark valley of impending doom, where evil men were surely waiting to take our possessions and our lives if necessary. To my relief, our first stop at the post office in Double Springs proved uneventful. We then left the main road and traveled to the post office in Bloomington Springs, a well-known summer resort. While waiting there, I tried to persuade my brother not to go any further. He and the driver laughed at me. Brother said he didn't have more than $200 or $300 to lose, and a stagecoach robbery would be a thrilling experience. We traveled another 15 miles below Cookeville to the old Hughes home. They also had a grocery store. Mr. Rayburn carried in the mail, and Brother followed him to buy some fruit. While alone, I saw a man about 50 yards away standing by an old rail fence. He walked out into the road, looked toward the stage, and then stepped back. Well, I called to the driver to hurry. But as we started to leave, the man ran over and inquired what the fare to Lebanon was, and he paid the $2.50 and took a seat by the window. I kept my eye on him. At about 10:30 that night, we neared the ridge when 2 more passengers joined us, Mrs. Harper and her son. Now, they were old settlers from Putnam County who had moved to McLeansboro, Illinois. Mrs. Harper had come back to sell her farm, which she did for $2,000. I suppose the robbers heard that Mrs. Harper and her money would be on the stage that night. We reached Pekin just after midnight. The postmaster must have been asleep because Mr. Rayburn blew the stage horn a great many times. I was convinced the robbers were just waiting to hear that horn, 'cause we were in the perfect place for a hold-up down there in the Lonesome Valley, and sure enough, we had no sooner left Pekin and began climbing the hill when we heard a deep, low voice yell, "Hold up! Hold up!" 3 men wearing long white masks rose up as if out of the ground. I declare, if I hadn't been so frightened half out of my skin, I would have turned to my brother and said, "I told you so!" The robbers pointed their guns at us and told us to clear the stage. The leader was wearing a broad-brimmed Texas hat and carried a long silver gun. Oh, how it shined in the moonlight. We were instructed to turn around and hold up our hands. Brother was standing at my right. He was stubborn and kept his hands in his pocket, and one robber pointed a gun at my brother's heart and another pointed a gun at my brother's head, so Mr. Rayburn and I quickly reached over and yanked brother's hands out of his pockets and held them up in the air. I turned to the man in the Texas hat and said, "Please don't kill him, and I will pray for you always." He thanked me and made the robbers step back. They searched the male passengers and took my brother's pocketbook and knife. After they relieved all the men of their pocketbooks, one of them came back, pointed his gun at my brother's chest, and said, "Give up every cent or I'll shoot your heart out." My brother, he said, "You have searched me once, search me again," and I could have kicked my brother. After taking everything they could find, the robbers finally left. We waited until it was quiet and we were sure they were gone, and then loaded back into the stagecoach. Mrs. Harper confided to me that she had hidden her money somewhere on her person, and I believe her. Brother said he had hidden money in his shoes, and the driver said he had hidden $2.50 in his mouth. The robbers weren't very smart, 'cause they didn't take the registered money pouch. Upon reaching Chestnut Mound, I sent a card back home. It read, "Dear Papa, as I had predicted, the stage was robbed. It saved most of our money. I was very much excited. Will write particulars when I reach Nashville. Lovingly, Z." And now you know why I believe there's something to be said about paying attention to your dreams.